Afternoon, everyone. I've been told that when you're presenting after lunch, make sure that you've got lots of pictures in your presentation. So that's what I've tried to do today. Thanks very much for everybody that's visited us at the stand. And for those who haven't yet, please do come along. I'm going to be talking about crop spraying. My name is Tim Wise. I'm the managing director of a company called PACSys, which is an acronym for Precision Agricultural Systems. We are a subsidiary of a large chemical and fertilizer distribution business in KZN, based in Belito on the north coast. And PACSys was established basically to about 18 months ago, officially 18 months ago, but I've been working on these projects probably for about 3 years now. PACSys was established to research the new technologies that were coming down the tracks into agriculture, and of which there were plenty, and there was quite a lot of hype about it. Precision agriculture was the tag phrase, buzzword in the industry about 2 years ago. And you had quite a lot of relatively uneducated, inexperienced people getting into agriculture, using a lot of these technologies, and with respect to farmers, you know, they will go off like sheep and follow something that they may think is going to change their businesses, and which turned out obviously to not benefit them, and obviously there were quite significant costs involved. So we basically went into this on behalf of our customers to siphon out all the best technologies as we saw them coming down the tracks. One of which was obviously crop spraying. Now in KZN, I'm not sure how many of you are from KZN. Sugarcane by area is obviously our biggest crop in that province, and our specialty is sugarcane. I've been to China a couple of times to meet with DJI, obviously negotiating, being appointed as their distributors in Southern Africa for a crop spraying drone that they have produced, which I will go into later on. And going overseas and doing that sort of negotiating, having a look at those technologies and negotiating those deals with who we saw were the best operators specifically for sugar. Now, that crop sprayer, we took it around the country, we imported one, we took it around the country to basically have a look at its applicability in other crops around the country. Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Northern Cape, all the way up onto the Highveld, the Free State, etc. All roads have led us back to sugar, and the reasons are because sugarcane averages between 2 to 3 hectare blocks. Very, very effective on your intensive crops such as your vegetables, your potatoes, those sorts of things. Not so effective on the Highveld here, on the maize and the wheat, because of the size of those areas. You're dealing with 100 to 150 hectare blocks in some cases. So all roads led us back to sugar very conveniently, because that's obviously our background and where we are most qualified. So I'm going to go through the benefits and the challenges of the crop spraying with the drone as opposed to crop spraying with a helicopter, microlight, or a fixed wing, basically manned aircraft, and talking mostly to the sugarcane industry. Yes, the drone definitely has applications in all other areas, but why is the drone, in our opinion, a better solution than the aircraft? KZN, again, if you are familiar with the KZN environments, very hilly, very windy, very difficult, very technical spraying conditions. And if you couple that with an average between 2 and 4 hectare block, and you're using aircraft such as helicopters, R-44s, fixed wings, microlights that are traveling at speeds of about 100 k's an hour, there ultimately is resulting in very, very poor application. I'm going to go into that now shortly. So just to take you through the slides, the disadvantages of manned aerial application. They're too big, too fast, and fly too high, which ultimately results in very poor coverage. Now, I'm not sure how clearly those photographs have come out, but when quite a few of the chemicals that are being applied are highly toxic to the environment and also to neighboring sugarcane blocks if they are younger than a certain age. That typically the aerial aircraft are going to leave about a 10 to 20 meter swath around the boundaries of the fields. And that shows up quite clearly, certainly on the image on the right there. That is a 5-hectare block, which is larger than the average. And a 10 to 20 meter swath, as we call it, has been left around the boundary of that field. Now, if you get your calculators out and you work out what a 10 meter swath is around the boundary on a 5-hectare field, you're effectively coming out with about a 75% coverage rate. So quite significant in terms of when you consider the consequences for food production, obviously revenue returns for the farmers, and scarily, a lot of the products, especially for insect control, borer control and what have you, there's nothing else coming down the pipelines. And there's certain insects now that if they develop a resistance to the products that are currently in distribution, it is a really, really frightening prospect. So under-application could ultimately reduce to disastrous consequences for the industry. They're also susceptible to human error. So none of those, because of the technicality of the terrain, none of those manned aircraft are flying on autopilot. And therefore, in terms of consistency of coverage, etc., you're getting a lot of striping effects. So basically the pilot relies on, in the microlights case, relies on memory in terms of what lines he needs to fly in the field, and that's the case on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side is helicopter application, and that was done, we were told that was done too low. So they were 2 or 3 meters too low. Inconsistent coverage equals reduced pest control, reduced food production, and farmer revenues. As I alluded to earlier, crop loss is a potential consequence of manned aerial application, and certainly pest, the development of resistance amongst your pests. They're environmentally unfriendly. The air tractor works, air tractor being one of the fixed wing aircraft, they consume about 300 liters of fuel per hour. Now, just a very loose calculation, if you apply that in terms of the areas that they can cover on a daily basis, if you apply that to South Africa's agricultural aerial crop spraying potential or industry, that's about 20 million liters of fuel per annum that is being used by the crop sprays. The image on the right is intended to depict that they are spraying mostly from quite a height, especially if it's inconsistent terrain. And your risk of drift and environmental hazards obviously associated with drift, with toxic chemicals drifting into water systems, neighboring crops, obviously populated areas, all of those sorts of things, is a lot higher with the aircraft. There's high pilot and property risk. Crop spraying, manned crop spraying is consistently ranked in the top 3 most hazardous occupations on the planet. There's about 50 deaths per 100,000 operators. Just last year, that on the left is actually a microlight accident that occurred in the North Coast. A good friend of ours, and these guys are also obviously members of their communities, etc., etc. So they do take it to the limits, especially when, as I say, the terrain isn't consistent and power lines and all of those sorts of things. The farmers complain because of the poor coverage, and then the guys start pushing the limits, and obviously tragedy can occur. Part 2, advantages of drone application, and in this case we're going to be showcasing the DJI Agras MG1S, which is the drone that we are exhibiting outside. It's capable of 100% coverage. I'm not sure how clearly that has come out. That was provided by one of our customers, and that again is about a 4 or 5 hectare block and you've achieved 100% coverage. Not only is it 100% coverage end to end, but you are achieving a very consistent coverage as well. So no striping, takes all the human error elements out of it. Full autonomy eliminates the human error, which gives you consistent quality application and crop protection. So as per that previous slide, it's 100% GPS operated, your swath widths are programmed in there, and you are getting very, very good coverage. You can also map out any obstructions in the field, including power lines, transmission poles, trees, etc., etc. Environmentally friendly. The drone operates at between 1.5 to 3.5 meters above the crop canopy. It's got 4 nozzles which are positioned directly below the propellers. This reduces the risk of your drift coming in from that height, obviously, and allows the drone to get right to the end and therefore achieve your 100% coverage, even with highly toxic chemicals. Quite a few of these chemicals traditionally are also applied by laborers on the farm. So from an environmental perspective, it's a hell of a lot safer, reducing the risk of exposure to your labor on the farm as well. Sorry. It's battery operated. If you are charging your batteries full time in the field using a generator, to cover the same amount of hectares, the same number of hectares, same area that the aircraft are covering in the same amount of time, you're probably going to need about 6 drones. Okay, the 6 drones consume, if you've got generators charging those batteries, cycle charging those batteries, you're using about 20 liters per hour, as opposed to the 300 liters of fuel that the aircraft are using. Very safe, travels at between 10 and 15 kilometers per hour. As I mentioned earlier, 1.5 meters to 3.5 meters operating height, and that's above the crop canopy, so typically about 5 to 6 meters off the ground. It has a maximum 1 kilometer range, limited to radio line of sight operations. Includes all typical DJI fail-safe features, and there's approximately, that number is outdated, that was the number that I was given about 3 months ago in terms of there being 7,500 units currently in operation. That figure in the last 3 months has gone up to 13,500 units in operation. And to date, no major injuries or damage to property reported. Job creation. Again, if you've got 6 drones in the field, which basically will compete with 1 aircraft, that's going to require 3 times the amount of personnel. And it's not, because of the lower barriers to entry, we're talking about creating jobs in the right sectors in this country at the moment. Lower barriers to entry, obviously it's cheaper. It's cheaper getting your licenses. Your RPL is 2 weeks, and also, excuse me, your RPL takes 2 weeks and costs about 20,000 rand. And a big factor in that RPA's personnel being 3 times is obviously your support staff on the ground. Therefore, it has massive economic empowerment potential. Challenges facing commercial rollout in South Africa. I don't think we're alone in this. Obviously, the regulatory challenges. It's an approximate 24 months for the full ROC process, 9 to 12 months for the RLA process. The new models are being released every 12 to 18 months with vastly improved functionality. So it's expensive equipment to justify the investment in the current regulatory environment, considering that there are new models getting released every 12 to 18 months with greatly improved functionality. And the fact, because of the crop sprayers, very easy in the rural areas to operate a crop sprayer without, without anybody seeing and reporting you, etc., etc. So it's created an environment for non-compliance. As said, financiers, we've engaged all the banks. The drone as a package with enough batteries to keep you flying and keep you going on a 24-hour basis costs about 230,000 Rand. So we need financial support. A lot of our customers do need financial support, and the financiers are unsure how to assess the risk in terms of the current regulatory framework and environment. Human resourcing. The RPA's crop spraying pilots require a variety of qualifications and experience as prescribed by the CIA and the Department of Agriculture. Currently, very few individuals in South Africa meet all of the criteria that are required. So therefore, there's going to have to be extensive investment in resourcing, in creating enough candidates basically to go out there and be legally compliant and act as crop spraying pilots. It's difficult to obviously invest in the time and effort that's required in resourcing all of these. For us, we are going very heavily into this market. We've obviously invested in the relationship with DJI, bringing in drones, and now also going through the licensing and compliance process. We ideally would like to know when we can pull the trigger on really resourcing our business, creating the pilots and the support staff out there to really be able to hit the ground running, obviously, when those approvals eventually come through. Thank you very much.